Our first speaker today is Dr. Oluwashola Okpodu, and she's an international development advisor with a focus on policy advocacy and strategic communications, behavioral change, and perception expert. She's also a certified trauma-informed recovery counselor and founder of Diary of a Trauma Survivor, with over 20 years experience in communications, advocacy, and psychosocial support. She combines academic insights with practical strategies to strengthen systems, help individuals and communities heal, rebuild, and thrive. Her work bridges trauma recovery, strategic communication, social change, storytelling, empowering diverse audiences through evidence-based counseling and gender advocacy. Please welcome Dr. Oluwashola Okpodu. She'll be speaking on the importance of storytelling, educating and empowering women through their stories. Dr. Oluwashola, welcome, ma. The floor is yours.
Can you hear me now? Good evening.
Yes, ma, we can hear you. Welcome, ma.
Yeah, thank you so much, Antonia, and happy International Women's Day. Okay.
Same to you, ma.
Yeah, so thanks for the introduction, and I would also like to, begin by thanking HerStory International for this honor. I must say that it is truly a privilege to join women, and allies from across the world today as we celebrate the International Women's Day, and most especially to reflect on a theme that is both powerful and deeply personal, which is her story, her rights, and her power. So, whenever I speak to women, I like to start with a simple question. So, let me begin with one, and that's who gets to tell the story of a woman's life? Is it society? Is it culture? Is it family expectations? Or is it history books, that often record the achievements of many men while quietly overlooking the contributions of women generally? Or is it even the media, that sometimes tells women who they should be? They set the rules, how women should look or how women should behave. Or could it be that, as women, we reach a point in our lives where we pause, then we reflect and say with clarity and courage that this is my story and I'll tell it myself my way. Because when we look at history generally, we will notice something interesting. Women have always lived full and complex lives, whether we like it or not. You see, women have built families, women have nurtured communities, women have sustained economies, supported movements, led revolutions, and even influenced nations. But for centuries, our stories as women were often edited, softened, minimized, diminished, or even completely erased. But you see, when women's experiences were filtered through someone else's perspective, it just shuts us up. You see, women's voices have always been considered too emotional, too assertive, too loud, too inconvenient, or even too threatening. And yet, despite the silence, women have continued to shape the world. And you see, that is why, the theme for this year, is a very, very important one. Now, at first glance, hearing a story, her right, her power, these words may seem like three separate ideas, but when we look closely, you would notice that they're deeply connected. Because when, women begin to tell their stories truthfully and authentically, something powerful begins to happen. And what's that thing? Women begin to reclaim their rights. And when, women reclaim their rights, they begin to step fully into their power. And you see, human beings understand the world through stories. Policies move systems, Statistics, of course, may inform decisions, but stories move hearts. Stories help us to see injustice clearly. Stories help us to understand the lived realities behind social issues that sometimes appear abstract or even distant. What again? Stories challenge stereotypes that have been repeated for generations, and stories also humanize struggles that numbers, and when I say numbers, I mean statistics alone, cannot capture. And perhaps most importantly, stories inspire courage. Now, let me give you an example, that just came to mind. You might hear a statistic that says 1 in 3 women globally, experience violence at some point in their lives. Now, that statistic is important because it tells us that something serious is happening, okay? But statistics can sometimes feel very distant. But just imagine this. When a woman stands up and says, let me use myself as an example, and I say something like, oh, my name is Shola, and I was told to endure abuse because marriage must be preserved at all costs. I stayed longer, than I should have because I was afraid of shame. But one day I chose my life, my safety, my dignity. Now, when you share a story like that and you personalize it and you humanize it, suddenly everything changes. So we now, move from being a statistics. Now we are listening to a human story. We see fear, we see the courage, we see the complexity of the choices that we are, as women sometimes have to make. And suddenly the world listens to us differently. And the truth is, stories give statistics a face, it gives a voice, and it gives a soul. And you see, throughout history, storytelling has, whether we like it or not, has shaped movements, that change societies. There are many examples. The global women's rights movement did not begin in conference rooms alone. It began when women spoke about lack of education, when women spoke about unequal pay, lack of property rights, and exclusion from leadership. Even the civil rights movement, if you remember vividly, gained momentum when individuals began telling the truth, about discrimination and injustice. And I remember, I think some few years ago, was the global Me Too movement, which reminded the world that silence had concealed a widespread, problem for far too long. And you see, for years, many women have experienced harassment, abuse, even in workplaces, not only in the family, not even in communities alone, but were discouraged from speaking about it. And I can give you a few examples. Women were told things like, don't speak up, you'd ruin your career. Don't speak up, no one will believe you. Don't speak up, just move on. Be grateful that you even have a job, be grateful that you have a family. And you see, silence protected powerful, systems, harmful systems that broke women. But you see, when women began sharing their stories publicly, what appeared to be isolated incidents suddenly revealed a global pattern. And you see, that is the power of storytelling. It exposes what silence hides. And you see, many of us were raised to believe that silence is strength, and that's a big lie. You were taught from a young age, like I shared earlier, that you don't speak too much, you don't speak where men are seated, you don't expose family matters, you must endure difficulties quietly, you must manage things discreetly. So, so many women grew up learning how to carry life quietly. They learned that if they're heartbroken, for instance, they have to be quiet about it or it's their fault. They learned quiet discrimination. They learned quiet abuse. They also learned quiet disappointment. And even resilience was, carried quietly. But silence has consequences from experience, from lived experiences, and the experiences I've also had with women that have kept silent over the years. You see, silence protects systems that harm women. Silence allows injustice to repeat itself without accountability. Silence keeps women invisible. And when women remain invisible, their rights become negotiable. And that is why storytelling matters so deeply. So, because telling the truth disrupts silence. So, let me share this with you. In my professional journey, I wear several hats. And one of them is my work as a trauma informed recovery counselor. And one of the most powerful things that I have observed in this work is this: healing often begins the moment someone finally tells the truth about what happened to them. Not the polished version, not the sugar coated version, not the version that makes everyone comfortable, but the honest version. And I have seen women carry painful experiences for years because they believed speaking about it would make them look weak. Women have also victimized themselves. Rather than telling themselves that they have survived this traumatic experience, they stay in that victim mindset. But the moment they begin to tell their stories truthfully, something shifts. They begin to see their experiences differently. They begin to realize that what happened to them does not define their entire identity. A woman who once saw herself as a victim begins to recognize herself as a survivor. And you see, silence slowly transforms into voice. Shame, and that's the major problem with so many of us women. We're so ashamed of our experiences. We don't want to share, and it's so unfortunate that women. I don't want to say this. Well, let me just put it this way: that some women are other women's problems. That's the truth. Women fighting women, women not supporting women. And this, can cause a lot of shame. And you see, shame begins to give way to clarity. Isolation turns into connection. And you see, something beautiful happens when we all share our story without being invalidated, without being diminished. Another woman somewhere listens quietly and begins to think, if Shola survived this, if Antonia survived this, maybe I can too. So stories become bridges between pain and healing. But storytelling does more than to heal individuals. It also transforms societies. I work in the policy space, and I've also found that policies often begin to change when stories make injustice impossible to ignore. Let's think about girls who are denied education because of poverty, because of early child marriage, or even cultural expectations. Think about women who face discrimination in workplaces where their contributions are overlooked or they're professionally diminished. Let's think about survivors of violence. It could be domestic violence, it could be anything, who struggle to access justice because of stigma. I have seen and heard cases, situations where a woman is raped or defiled, and she reports at the police station, and the next thing she's asked is, "What were you wearing? Why were you there at that time? Why are you fraternizing? With a man?" So many um, very terrible statements that make women shrink and say, "Oh, no matter what I say, if I speak up, I won't be believed anyway." You know, let's also think about women who are excluded from leadership spaces even when they are qualified. And they tell you because you're a woman, you can't take up that position. It's a male dominated space, and you're not wanted there, directly or indirectly. So for many years, these experiences were treated as isolated incidents. But when women began sharing their stories publicly, patterns became visible. And you see, once patterns become visible, society can no longer pretend that the problem does not exist. So storytelling then becomes a powerful tool for advocacy because it influences public opinion, It shapes public policy discussions. It also encourages institutional reform. And over time, it begins to even shift cultural, norms and expectations. So, I mentioned earlier that I wear many hats. And, I also work in communication and advocacy. And there is a simple but profound idea that guides much of my work. And it's that narratives shape reality. The stories societies repeat eventually become the beliefs society, holds. And if society repeatedly tells women that they're weak, that we are emotional, that we are incapable, you see, those narratives begin to influence how women are treated. But when women begin to tell their own stories, their own way, in their own voice, in their own language, stories of leadership, stories of resilience, stories of creativity, stories of strength, those narratives begin to shift. Now, let me, touch on the concept of power very quickly. So, you see, power is often misunderstood, and I'll explain why I say so. Many people think power means position, power means authority, power means control. But true power is something deeper than that. Power is the ability to define your identity. You see, when someone else controls your story, they also influence how you are perceived. But when the woman claims her voice and begins to tell her own story, she begins to say, I am not what happened to me. I am not the label society or friends or families or communities or even the church gave me. I am the author of my own life, and that is true power. So, storytelling in a nutshell allows we women to reclaim, these, essential things: our identity, our individual agency, our dignity, um, you know, um, and so on. I think at this juncture, I would also like to emphasize that it's important that we document our stories. Many of us women think that visibility is vanity, and that's not true. I like to put it this way: visibility is strategy, it's positioning. You tell your stories, you tell your wins, your contributions, you document them. And when you document your contributions, your wins, your achievements, no matter how little they are, it builds collective memory. It ensures that women's voices become part of our shared human story. Um, you know, um, it's important that our struggles, our resilience deserves recognition. And I think I would just like to, just wrap up here. Maybe I should just quickly, touch the issue of women saying that they're broken. I hear that a lot and it breaks me. I mean, I tell women that you're not broken. When you say that you're broken, it simply means that you cannot be fixed. And that's a lie from the pit of hell. What many women carry is not brokenness, it is layers of experience, layers that shaped them. Layers that that strengthened them, layers that prepared them for the next chapter of their lives. And your story may help another woman realize that her own life is not over. And your own story can also make her realize that she is still evolving. She's evolving. So in a nutshell, we need to tell our stories, we need to document our wins. And I would also use this opportunity to urge all women listening that we should continue to create spaces where women are not only heard, but believed. Because when women, tell their stories, the world gains understanding. And when women step into their power, communities gain a whole lot of progress. Thank you very much. And once again, happy International Women's Day.
Session. Thank you, thank you. And I'm sure I learned a lot. In fact, I have my jotter here writing down things, and I'm sure everyone here got something from your message. What stood out for me was when you said pattern become visible, when women storytelling becomes a powerful tool for us to change narratives. And when these narratives that are negative continue to fly, it becomes the reality of society. It is so beautiful to hear that. And I'm sure every woman on this call is gaining something or has learned something from what you've said today, learning that when they share their stories, talk openly about their struggles, they empower other women to see light at the end of the tunnel and know that, oh, if Mrs. Chioma has survived this, if Dr. Shola has survived this, if Mrs. Ngozi has survived this, or whoever the case may be, I too can come out triumphant. I too can become better. So thank you so much, Ma, for joining us today, for lending your voice to this conversation. Thank you, thank you.